Hello and welcome to Human Nature. On this crossover episode with economist Bob Murphy, we talk about Donald Trump, and I don't know if you've noticed, but he has been pretty busy lately in these first couple weeks in office. He is flooding the zone with all manner of crazy new things, keeping everybody on the defensive, including podcasters, and smashing all manner of things that kind of deserve to get smashed. So, this one is an awful lot of fun. We talk about an awful lot of things, and I hope you will enjoy.
Human Nature, a journey in search of a peaceful and prosperous society with human nature as a guide. Led by your host, Adam Heyman.
Hey there, Bob.
Hey, Adam.
So I don't know. It's been pretty boring this week. Do we even have anything to talk about?
Is there anything going on? Buffalo Bills lost, so I'm kind of bummed about that. Other than that, I don't really know.
Well, we can do 30 minutes on that easily. We did a previous episode talking about, I think it was right after the inauguration and the 200 or something executive orders that Trump immediately put out. And those were amazing and earth-shattering.
I was largely deferring to your intuition, and you had the inside info, but Ross was pardoned, so we technically didn't know it at that point. But then
we didn't know it only happened the next day. But yeah, that did happen. Check the sign again. Ross is free. I don't know if we talked about it in that episode though, but it's like he's moving at a breakneck pace. And then over this last handful of days, as we're going to talk about, he's done another dozen amazing things, and each one is super important and pivotal and making people's head explodes.
It's funny, even as we brainstormed before this, folks, I just realized that we won't even cover it, but he also wanted to start a sovereign wealth fund. That was
right. I know we could do a whole episode on that. I know
we don't have time.
And it reminded me, I think there's a couple things going on here, or it reminded me of a couple things. One is, I think Trump learned a little bit from the last time, and he is employing a tactic overtly that's like flooding the zone. He is keeping the media and the deep state, if such a thing exists, and its political opponents so off balance with all the incredible big things that he's doing that they don't have time to spend a whole news cycle just complaining about one particular thing, because here comes three more equally disruptive things. And I think that's kind of brilliant. He's shaking the box, a term I'm going to use a bunch in today's episode. And
just on that point, because I saw some of the progressive critics, they were saying something like, I saw recently, I'm paraphrasing, this wasn't exactly it, but this was the spirit of it. It was like some guy tweeted something about why the Trump administration was being very amateurish, and then somebody came in and high-fived the guy, saying words to the effect of, I feel like the entire government is being run right now by a bunch of 18 to 25-year-olds who are in their mom's basement, or so, like, being that not only do we not know who's making these decisions, but this wasn't well thought out. And I agree with you, Adam, that no, actually it was. And some of the stuff we're going to get to, folks, there is a method behind the madness.
I think so.
Whether you agree with it or not. And so, yeah.
It reminded me like he's shaking the box in order to make substantive change. And since I think that the box is, the government, a thing that's massively corrupt and too big and authoritarian and obtrusive, and needs to be rethought and scaled way down, I'm like, yeah, break this box. And the more he does incredible things, incredible not like I approve of them all, but they're just amazing and large things that he's doing, and destructive to the status quo, which I think is great. He reminds me, I don't know how much of a Marvel fan or Avengers fan or Hulk fan you are, but he reminds me of the Hulk. And the Hulk's catchphrase is Hulk smash. And so every time I see a headline, I'm like, Trump smash. Yeah, keep going, guy. Let's change everything.
Yeah, I don't know if this sheds any light on my position vis-a-vis the Incredible Hulk, but I'm planning on doing a Bob Murphy Show episode where I'm just going to go through the pilot episode of the Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno TV series and just go through because it's amazing. I watched it recently. I was like, this is way better than I even remember. Like, it was kind of like when I watched the Transformers movie, where I loved it as a kid. my brother and I watched that Hulk series, and then I went and rewatched it recently, and I just was like, wow, that was amazing. Whereas other stuff I've watched from my childhood is like, oh, that show's terrible. Why the heck did I watch that?
I haven't seen that in so long. I remember loving that show as a kid, though.
Should we just talk about that instead of Trump?
It'd be way better, more heartwarming. We could talk about Lou Ferrigno as an actor. He just never got as far as I was hoping he was going to get. Well, in the vein of Trump smash, let's start off with USAID.
Can I say one thing on that?
Sure, of course.
They apparently Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the consideration to be the Hulk.
I heard
but
that.
he wasn't big enough. He wasn't tall enough. He just because Arnold Schwarzenegger is actually not that. Whereas Lou Ferrigno, because the Hulk is a Hulk. It's not just he's muscular.
He's
and Lou Ferrigno is just a taller, monstrosity. So that's apparently why they picked him over Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I did not know that.
Yep.
So a lot of people, I'll bet, had never heard of USAID before, but since I'm like a quarter or a third of the way in on Scott Horton's amazing book, Provoked, as I was reading the headline, and just earlier in the day, I was reading a page with USAID all over it because that's a CIA cutout used to destabilize governments for these many decades. And I bet most people had never even heard of it. And do you have any insight on why Trump picked this to shut it down? Was it a DOGE thing, or who's he listening to?
Oh, I have an anecdote about a particular way that the people were freaking out about it. So I don't have the overarching thesis on it. My guess is that, like you said, there was a lot of black ops,
for sure.
stuff going on overseas that went through this and nobody ever looked at it. And so Elon Musk comes in and starts kicking it around and has flashlights and people are, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Well, let me give a little bit of the play-by-play just in case people don't know. Trump didn't exactly shutter the organization. According to NBC, he's shutting it down as an independent entity and putting it under the State Department. What little things he might want to keep going, Marco Rubio is going to be in charge of. But yeah, if you read Scott's book, they openly brag about USAID and National Endowment for Democracy and all these other CIA cutouts just actively go into other countries and start funding things that look like organic, popular vehicles for a movement, like unions and protest groups, the radio stations, the media of these various countries, and they start fomenting and paying for what looks like an organic revolution, but it isn't. It's just a regime change operation, but done a little bit more elegantly than I guess they used to do in the 50s or whatever. And so I guess it was DOGE. The Elon quote I saw was, looking at this thing, it's not just an apple with a worm in it. Rather, it's a ball of worms. And I'm thrilled that he's getting rid of it. I can't believe he's cutting things that are so, horrible so quickly.
Well, and as you said with that NBC quote, it's my understanding. It's not just, it's gone. It is, let's open up the hood. Let's look at this and see which of these programs should be saved and which not. And that's what's making everyone freak out. And yeah, there's like a pause in terms of until we
the people who don't know are hearing some propaganda about how it's all humanitarian aid and how can you possibly cut these great things. But that's just this paper thin veneer of what this organization does. The rest of it is just a horror show.
Yeah. And I have one on that. So let's see. Oops. Okay. Sorry here, Adam. Let me just pull up something.
Well, while you're looking, I'll quote Mike Benz, who said on either Joe Rogan or maybe it was Tucker about USAID, quote, "When a job is too dirty for the CIA, they give it to USAID."
Okay, I got it pulled up here. So Matt Darling, and that is apparently his real name. It'd be
Darling,
yeah,
Darling,
Doctor Darling. He has the Twitter handle Best Trousers for those who know him. So he is I think I'm on solid ground calling him like a center left kind of guy. I don't know if he has an advanced degree in economics, but he's definitely like and actually, and like when people, his claim to fame over the last 2 years, anytime someone has a stat about this many Americans or households are living paycheck to paycheck, he comes in to like actually it and show that, oh no, that's not, he's got like some standard stats that he deploys. So he has been like debunking and rolling his eyes at the economy being in bad shape under Biden. Okay. So I don't think he's like outright like progressive Democrat necessarily, but that's kind of his role, that he's always coming in and fact checking the right wing, exaggerations or hyperbole, right? And then bring in some comments. I'm the adult in the room. Like that's his shtick. Okay. So on this one, he retweeted this woman, Jennifer Griffin, had tweeted out saying, Atul Gawanda confirms 50 top USAID officials removed. DOGE teams forced their way into USAID offices this weekend, he confirmed to Fox News. And then as part of that Matt, put like copied and pasted into his own text of what he was tweeting, the quotation from her tweet saying, "We were on the verge of ending HIV, TB, and malaria. That has all ended with this pause. It is a gift to our enemies and competitors." Okay. So that's what I'm saying. Like, and let's just walk through, if you'll permit me, Adam, here. Let me just walk through this. So that was, that's the way they're selling. Like you said, and this is stuff that like CIA overturning foreign governments, and it's being billed as not just like cutting off funding for Sesame Street. This is like, all these foreign people are going to die now because of Elon. And I'm not engaging in hyperbole. This is clearly like there's people, this multi-billionaire coming in and just murdering all these foreign babies because of, it just, okay. So when I saw that, and so some people jumped on that quote and they're like, how does it help our enemies and competitors to let more people in Africa get AIDS? You know what I mean? Like, that's not obvious. Why are they throwing that in there as opposed to just, hey, that's the wrong, that's awful. More people are getting sick. But putting that aside, I saw that and I said, Matt, you think they were really, so I'm talking to him in the tweet here. I said, Matt, you think they were really on the verge of ending HIV, TB, and malaria? Those three were on the verge of ending all at the same time, and all right when Trump came into power. Right?
So unfortunate.
You see,
the timing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then he answered and said, all of these are diseases with rapidly decreasing prevalence. And then he's like quoting me saying, those three were on the verge of ending all at the same time and all right when Trump came into power. And he just wrote yes with a question mark. Like, like I asked him, people can fly up in machines in the air. And he's like, yeah, how do you not know that? Okay. And then he says, these are diseases where lots of effort has been put into eradication. Okay. And then, he has a follow-up tweet. Like, it's not a weird coincidence. Over time, disease prevalence for diseases with effective treatments / prophylactics decreases. And then he had a follow-up tweet. I guess he came up with a zinger, and he's got in quotation marks, like to be a fake quote, and says, you don't really, and really is in caps, you don't really believe that the Bush administration eradicated rubella in 2004, ... just before the election. Okay, so you see how he's acting like what I said is not just wrong, but he's mocking me, right?
Yeah.
You get that? Okay.
Yeah.
So don't worry, folks. You might like say, Bob, this isn't really just a place for you to vent. It is actually, but let's continue. This is almost done. Okay. So what I didn't like about his little, his last finishing move there was that it seemed like he wasn't getting my point. I wasn't saying, no, a disease can never be eradicated. That wasn't my point. My point was that it was all three, all at the same time, and right when Trump came in, such that, oh, damn it, him cutting the USAID thing meant now we can't eradicate these three things that were on the verge. Like, that's what I was saying. And coming from someone who clearly has a vested interest in keeping that, you know what I mean? This wasn't like they just ran and grabbed some random scientist to quote him. This was someone who was, her point was to complain about the program being cut. So then I, as I'm wont to do, came up with an analogy. And so I answered him and I said this thing, and don't worry, folks, I'm actually going to get into something important here besides just me being clever. So I have a little fake, play, and I have Matt : so these are Matt's lines in the play. This carnival barker said a lady in the crowd just asked him to flip a quarter 3 times and get all heads, and he did it. And then Bob : you don't believe him, do you? Matt: yes, just yesterday I flipped a quarter and it came up heads. Okay, so that was me distilling down our exchange and why I think I'm in the right. Okay, so that's where things stood. And then it occurred to me, him just actualing me and talking about how, these diseases are all getting knocked down over time. Say, I'm not going to take his word for it. I'm actually going to go look it up.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
And it turns out
the devil, you say.
I went to the WHO. You say, who did you consult, Bob? And I say, yes.
Yes.
And we could keep doing that. Okay. The World Health Organization, the WHO. And it turns out for all three of those, and what I looked up was to say, what is the, the number of cases, or what's the prevalence? Because he said that was the term, prevalence. And for malaria, TB, and HIV, the HIV, I looked at Africa specifically. I think what I'm saying is also true globally, but I looked at Africa because I know that's what the issue was. And so it was, the WHO's data. It was like a 2024 report referring to 2023 data. So these data were as of 2023, but it's the latest available. And for all three of them, they were at record high levels, according to the WHO's latest data, which, call me crazy, I don't think you could honestly describe as on the verge of eradication.
It's almost like the guy trying to protect the organization is spinning a tale, a yarn.
And so I got screenshots of all that. Did that. Matt, nowhere to be found. I guess he's busy blowing up somebody else, citing, paycheck to paycheck statistics. But some other people came in to defend his honor. And I was waiting, and I wasn't being a jerk about it. I wasn't saying, aha, you guys are all liars. I just posted that and said, what am I missing here? Because according to the WHO, and I even left open a thing that it was 2024 a doozy, meaning they really
they really were getting traction.
They really got it under wraps. And so the most pushback I've gotten is one person came in and said, well, you're looking at, for the HIV one, it's like the people who have it, but really what you want to look at is what the person had in mind, who said we're on the verge of curing or eradicating, is the number of new infections. And so there, I did go look that up, and that is dropping rapidly. But even looking at the trend, it would be about 20 years before the new infections go to zero. Okay. So again, big picture, they said those three were on the verge of being eradicated. And in the context of Trump pausing the budget, clearly leading you to believe, oh, now it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? We were just about to do it. And now, the last 6 months of funding, we need, and no, two of them were all times high, and one, another 20 years, we would have not, nipped it in the bud. That's what they meant by on the verge of being eradicated.
Or we could maybe trust that Marco Rubio would just stop doing regime change operations and then maybe keep on funding whatever it is that was supposed to cure these diseases.
Yeah, there's that as well. So anyway, that was just my excursion. That doesn't prove that everything about USAID is bad, or that everyone complaining and saying this is heartless budget cuts that don't, are wrong.
Before we,
but this particular one, I was astonished by how much people were just openly telling me, and I'm leaving stuff out. There were people mocking me and just calling me you don't have to be an economist to understand how to and then I showed them the WHO data, and the person was like, oh yeah, this isn't really my area. Sorry for being a complete jerk to you. 2 tweets, anyway.
Well, before we move on, let me, I'm quoting from an article I found on Mises.org here recently, just to show exactly what this organization is so people know. As Ron Paul explained in his column on Monday, quote, USAID is a key component of the U.S. government's regime change operations worldwide. Much of the agency's funding gets passed on to NGOs and media organizations in regions that are central to Washington's foreign agenda. The same goes for dissident groups and, quote, independent media outlets in and around countries controlled by governments that Washington wants to overthrow. As the New York Times revealed deep in their article about the USAID freeze, a substantial number of the groups and media organizations that make up the opposition coalition in Iran are struggling after being cut off from their primary source of funding, the U.S. government. The same goes for Ukraine, where the freeze revealed that 90% of media organizations in the country rely on U.S. government grants. 90%. So not only has U.S. aid been used to fund groups working to unseat governments Washington wants toppled, but also to fund the outlets spreading the Washington party line around the world. That's who U.S. aid is. It has nothing to do with HIV and whatever else. Those are just cover stories. things to point to, just in case anybody thinks about looking into this just evil organization.
And by the way, the reason I made the big or the Sesame Street reference was that historically that would be a thing when they would is the National Endowment for the Arts. Was that the thing that it was like, conservatives would come in, they'd want to start cutting stuff, and they would find all of this.
That's right. Yeah.
Horribly offensive stuff being funded by the federal government.
And they're like, what, do you hate Big Bird?
Right. And then there's one part of the budget went to this thing that then also funded stuff, including Sesame Street. And so then it was like, oh, you want to get rid of Big Bird, and
it's always the same story. Like you're worried about, raising the spending cap, and they're immediately, if they do anything about that, they shut down the parks, the thing that doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, I think is it called like the Washington Monument Syndrome or something like that? I think they actually have a term for it. Yeah,
exactly. All right, let's move on to, you said you had something about some DOGE lawsuits.
Oh, yeah. So among other things, they're claiming there's lawsuits. There's actually, I think, two separate sets of ones, but the one I'm focusing on is some unions filed lawsuits alleging the largest data breach in history that is, Elon Musk is responsible for. And so if you just kind of casually read the headlines, and certainly if you read things on Twitter, you would think that already everyone's social security number is gone, or not gone, but has been breached and is in the being harvested by Elon Musk's buddies or something. And that's the research I've done. What I've concluded is, even looking at the allegations and whatever, it's simply, DOGE is going around and going into these various agencies, and they're getting access to like the systems that the Treasury uses to send payments to people. And they want to look at that. And unions, this lawsuit is alleging that, well, no, for all we know, they're not properly handling that data. And so let's put a pause in this until we can be sure. And that's really it. It's more of a, not that they can point to anything specific that they know was a breach of privacy or data. It just, we don't know what they're doing. And so
throw up any smoke screen to keep people that care from looking into what we are doing.
Yep. And so again, it's so, and the Trump administration, and I think Trump himself, like at a press conference, was just saying, because people were alleging, oh, so Elon's just coming in and firing people. And he was saying, well, no, they make recommended, he doesn't have the power. He can't fire people. It's, if we agree with what he says, then we go ahead and do it. You know what I mean? So it's like, if there's a company that's in financial trouble and they bring in some outside consultants, like an office space, they interview, what would you say that you do here? And it's not that those outside consultants have the power to fire people. It's that they're brought in to do a job, to assess the company, and then they give feedback to the owners, who can then choose to act on those recommendations or not. So that's what's going on here. So yeah, if Elon Musk is being tasked to come in and look at all the spending and find inefficiencies, he needs to know how is the government spending its money right now. So again, I'm not saying there hasn't been a breach of data, but I'm saying they don't know either. Like, it's just a big thing. And yet if you saw, again, it wasn't being touted as a very risky maneuver, or we need more information to know if this is the biggest data breach in history. When no, what they mean is Elon and some people that he's working for who have, Elon, has special clearances and whatever, you know what I mean? Like anyway, I think I've made my point here that it's just shocking, the chasm between what is going on and then what you would think if you just listen to the critics.
Yeah. One man's healthy sunshine giving transparency to the system is another man's data breach. It's just goofy. So, it wasn't that long ago that you and I had a whole episode talking about Trump's proposed tariffs and all the short and long-term effects that such a thing might cause. And one of the things we talked about is, hey, maybe he's just using them as, a negotiating ploy, using the threat to accomplish this and that and the other. And then not 2 days later, or 2 days after they get enacted, he manages to browbeat Mexico and Canada with these things into getting some sort of concessions about border security or fentanyl or something. And then a third one where Colombia wasn't going to allow expatriation of people back to their home country. And then I think, if I heard this correctly, from the golf course, he called the president of Colombia and threatened him with a tariff. And the plane landed. What do you know? Everything's fine. You got it, Senior Trump, which is just amazing. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I've seen the critics try to poo-poo it, and they're saying the way they're spinning it is the Trudeau and the Mexican, is it a prime minister or a president? I forget.
I think it's a president. This
You
Jewish,
can tell how much I know about Mexico.
right? Yeah,
I know it's a
brand
woman.
brand new Jewish lady. Yeah, which is kind of amazing. But
A brand new Jewish lady? You mean
I
she just
mean,
converted, or she's a newborn?
no, I mean, she
She
is a
used to
new
be a man,
president.
and now she's a lady.
She
That's
is a
brand
new
new.
president. I think it might
Okay.
be their first female president. I'm not sure. And it's interesting. She's
Yeah.
Jewish. We wouldn't expect that in Catholic land.
Well, they're disproportionately influential.
I
So
hear that. I hear
yeah.
that.
So anyway, yeah. So the way I've seen the people who hate Trump trying to spin it is that they're both Canada and Mexico are just agreeing to stuff they agreed to years ago. Like, so, haha, this is just all, they played Trump. And the stuff they agreed to, like you're saying, like the border enforcement and cracking down on fentanyl and that, I don't think that was the anyway. So I don't buy that. And then even if it were true, if they agreed to it years ago and then weren't doing it, and then now he said, hey,
yeah,
you better start doing the thing you agreed to for, and then they started doing it like that, even on its own terms. It's not obviously a, Trump being done. You know what I mean? Like, that's not blowing up in Trump's face. He's still won, assuming they actually do it this time.
Yeah, there's two huge problems with that objection, and you just raised one. Yeah, okay, they agreed to it a couple of years ago. They obviously weren't doing anything. And the other is, if he's getting played, he still has the whip raised above their head. I mean, these tariffs are only paused to see if they actually follow through. And one more thing on this subject, before people think that all of a sudden I'm fine as a libertarian with what Trump is doing, I'm not. And one of the obvious bad consequences is I've got a buddy who relies on, he makes skateboards and he does the high-tech printing of the decks here in the States, but he gets the decks from a factory just south of the border, or a lot of them anyway. And if these tariffs go through, like, he's thinking about just shutting down his business. And now he's got to live with, the uncertainty of, his entire operation. Does he reinvest in capital? For example, this isn't all just roses and gravy. That's not a correct phrase. There are real negative consequences.
Why would you want roses and gravy?
Look, you don't know. You don't judge me for what I like to eat.
Or is it like just the garnish? Like, it's just the presentation. You got the gravy and then there's roses.
I'm a romantic. I hold the rose. I slurp
candlelit
the gravy.
dinner.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sort of. I mean, you'd sort of get the impression that Bob and I are admiring Trump for his business savvy and his negotiating deal, but no, I'm annoyed that he's putting so much uncertainty in the game, and I hope that we get to certainty pretty quickly, and this doesn't freeze entrepreneurial action for people who are, trying to get a cheaper product brought in rather than, rely on how hard it is to do business here in the States.
Yeah, so I won't dwell on it here because I know we have so much to cover, but something that came to my attention recently, and I'm going to have Josh Hendrickson as my guest to interview him for the Human Action podcast, which will drop the week of February 12th, is that the Trump's new pick for the Council of Economic Advisors to be the head of the Council of Economic Advisors. He hasn't been confirmed yet, but he's the guy that Trump nominated, is Stephen Moran, who is like the head guy at Hudson Bay Capital, and he's got a PhD in economics from Harvard. So this guy's in some schlub, and he's also got some background at the Treasury and whatnot. But he, in November of 2024, he released a 41-page document titled "A User's Guide to Restructuring the Global Trading System." And so let me just read the first two paragraphs and I'll stop. So, we'll put links here, folks. Like I said, we won't get into it in this episode because it would take too long, but let me just show you what he has in mind here. The desire to reform the global trading system and put American industry on fair ground vis-a-vis the rest of the world has been a consistent theme for President Trump for decades. We may be on the cusp of generational change in the international trade and financial systems. The root of the economic imbalances lies in persistent dollar overvaluation that prevents the balancing of international trade. And this overvaluation is driven by inelastic demand for reserve assets. As global GDP grows, blah, 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 blah. In this essay, I attempt to catalog some of the available tools for reshaping these systems, the trade-offs that accompany the use of those tools, and policy options for minimizing side effects. He goes on, tariffs provide revenue, and if offset by currency adjustments, present minimal inflationary or otherwise adverse side effects consistent with the experience in 2018 through 2019. Okay, so I'll stop reading from there, but just to give you folks a taste. So you can see this is a Harvard economics PhD writing this stuff, and I'm 15 pages through it at this point, taking notes. I'm not, like Adam's saying, I'm not for tariffs, but this isn't just like, they're taking our jobs and we're gonna, we could get some more money here. And no, it is, they're talking about, well, there's $1 a reserve asset. And then in that context, and here's what, and it's citing things which I didn't know, that like the US average tariff rate vis-a-vis the rest of the world is like 2%, whereas Europe is like 5%. And I think China's 10%, something like that. Right. So there is a solid case that, like, oh yeah, this does seem like it's a kind of a screwy thing. Again, the case for free trade, I still believe in. But anyway, I'm just saying the situation is a lot more nuanced than I had realized. And whether it's, take it for what it's worth, it looks like what Trump is doing is not just like, tariff here, tariff. Like there is a plan behind this for the people that have his ear. And that, like you're saying, Adam, it seems a lot of this stuff is the threat is there to get some concessions and then they back off. And that I think partly a longer term, what they actually might want to have happen is countries around the world diversify away from the dollar. And they realize, like, this is not good that the U.S. has this thing hanging over our head. Whenever they want to get a concession, they can just slap on tariffs. And so how would you, diversify out of that? And that actually, ironically, that could conceivably help U.S. manufacturing if it weakens the dollar is possibly what the thinking is. All right. So like I said, we'll have the links if you want to look at that, folks. And if you watch the Human Action podcast, I'll be doing an episode on that, but I thought that was pretty interesting.
No, definitely. There's a lot of moving parts. And if you can use the threat of tariffs to lower other countries' tariffs, I mean, okay. So let's move on. I bet you thought you weren't going to hear about Gitmo this week, but we have heard. Let me lay down what happened and then we'll hear what you think about it. Trump floated the idea, in fact, started flying to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, illegal immigrants suspected of being violent criminals. It started yesterday, I think, 4th of February. The legality of what he's doing is completely unclear. I don't know how that's going to shake out. And something people might not know about Gitmo. I'm reading this from CNN.com. Quote, for decades, the Guantanamo base has included a facility known as the Migrant Operations Center, where U.S. immigration officials have screened some asylum seekers intercepted at sea. That area is separate from Guantanamo Bay's detention center, the post-9/11 military prison, where the U.S. still holds more than a dozen terrorism suspects. So I guess Trump's plan is just to massively expand that operation. And I don't know how he, it's quote, illegal immigrants suspected of being violent criminals. What does that mean? As people are being looked at on the southern border, what does it mean to be suspected? So that's happening.
Yeah. And the thing that really alarmed me was, I don't know if you saw it, that the proposed El Salvador offering.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Hey, well, for a fee, for an appropriate fee, we'll take your violent criminals and we'll put them in our prison because we're pretty good here at dealing with that. And so among all the other possible issues one might have with it, and I'm not downplaying them, I would caution people to don't just think of it as, well, I mean, we got violent criminals in our jails here. Why wouldn't we just outsource it and free up? If it's a win-win, aren't you economists all for? And it's the same reason I'm very alarmed by like a work release program, that like, oh, if inmates are allowed to make stuff for Walmart or whatever and get paid $2 an hour, and you might say, well, it's good, if it's voluntary and they get it, because then that could give an incentive for judges to give harsher penalties, right? In other words, it's not just a given as to, well, you did the crime, now you get the time, that to know that, oh, there's this ability to outsource U.S. prison population to some other place that might mean more Americans end up getting convicted of stuff. And again, if you think Trump is awesome and, oh, it's not going to happen here, it's just going to be the, owning the libs. Okay. But Trump is not going to be in power forever. And so again, I think that's a really bad precedent. And certainly, can you imagine the pendulum when the next Democrat, after all the stuff he's done, if you thought
I know
they weren't constrained before. So I don't think, people who are critical of the government want to have this precedent that, oh yeah, basically you can get shipped off to another prison site that's not even in our country. So that's my thoughts on that.
I am horrified by this as well, but I can't help making the joke, what, Bob, are we going to have to pull your economist card? You don't believe in comparative advantage anymore?
I mean, I do, but
they just specialize on keeping our prisoners. They do it cheaper than we do.
Again, it like in a in an ANCAP regime or something, that would make sense. That have them go to the cheapest place or whatever. But there's this reason to believe that the procedure actually only makes criminals be convicted, as opposed to
if you favor this, Biden would have shipped the January 6th people down there if he had this, as a policy. All the people that you don't want the government to have this power. It's horrible. And here's a good one. He said
there's more.
There's even more. I think we mentioned it in that other episode I just talked about, but the president, when he appointed Linda McMahon to head up the Department of Education, he said, I told Linda, I hope you do a great job in putting yourself out of a job. I want her to put herself out of a job, Education Department. So he's actually signing something to abolish the Department of Education. And according to CNN, the move would come in two parts, sources said. The order would direct the Secretary of Education to create a plan to diminish the department through executive action. Trump would also push for Congress to pass legislation to end the department, as those working on the order acknowledged that shuttering the department would require Congress's involvement. And all I'll say here before I turn it over to you, Bob, is this is more of that shaking the box thing I was referring to earlier. Who knows if he can do this? Who knows if he can get it passed? But I do believe that this box needs to get shaken, if not thrown off the side of a cliff. And even if the thing doesn't get ended, maybe it pushes the school choice movement, shines a light on the need to break up, teachers' unions and all the other horrible things that are poisoning our kids' minds all across the country. So I'm all for this. Trump smash, shake the box, do all the things. I love this.
Yeah, it's with a lot of these things, I don't know the legality or constitutionality of it and so forth. So we'll see. But my reaction when I saw that, by the way, one thing, folks, is that I did see Trump making remarks on this, and it's not that he was saying, oh yeah, the government has no role in education. He was saying, we want to return this to the states.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he thought that for the last 20 years or whether he's been coached well, but he's definitely much more coherent. And it does seem like you were saying, Adam, I think he learned from the first term, and now he's got a much better ground game, and this is much more thought out. And he's got small government people who have been advising him and saying, no, if you want that to be the outcome, this is the way you package it. And that actually kind of makes sense. It's, oh yeah, you're not against education, but there's no reason it needs to be funded from Washington. Right. And oh yeah. Okay. So that's, the way he's been, but yeah, I was amazed because when Linda McMahon, I think in the first time around, was being promoted as a possible pick, people were finding stuff she had written in the past and like, oh no, she's radical. She would like to abolish the Department of Education if she got put in it. And I was thinking like, oh yeah, okay. Just like when they were warning, the first time if Trump gets in, he's going to appoint judges who are going to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Right.
And I was like, okay, guys,
okay,
sure.
okay, boomer, sure.
So I kind of have to say, wow, you guys, maybe we are in Handmaid's Tale next week. And we just, I thought we were trolling the whole time. So there's all that. And I think you're right. And like in a different timeline, if Trump was just totally normal and was talking about maybe cutting the capital gains tax or whatever, and then he said this Department of Education stuff, that would have been the news cycle for 2 months.
Forever.
And now it's like maybe a few hours, and it's like you got to go on to something else. Because
I think they've already forgotten
yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with the things we've got coming up here on this very episode. And then one last little one before we get to the meat. He just signed today, Trump, an executive order abolishing men in women's sports, which makes my wife very happy. This has been a pet issue of hers for quite some time. And I think this is
she
just
gonna go back into boxing now.
Yeah, she's got a stiff jab. No, but she hates all this stuff. Just men in dresses, the creepy pervs we invented, separate women's spaces to keep, women free from. All these pervs are in their bathrooms, in their prisons, in their sports, and it's just gross. So, yeah, at least as far as the federal government, which is mostly Title IX, they're just not going to allow men in women's sports. And I say, yay, finally, about time. This was insane.
Yeah, it's what can you say? I was recently watching what's his name? Jordan Peterson had Michael Malice on, and people have said this before, but he just said it again. That's why it's fresh in my mind that one of the most basic things is like the difference between men and women. And so if you can just get the public to go along with that, it's wrong just to get all hung up on the particulars. Oh, but it's women's sports, and well, if it's a sport that's not a contact, well, then maybe, but the point is if they can get you to do that, then they can get you to do anything. Like that's just
precisely right. There's a
kind of like with the letting them do the naked body scanner stuff, with the TSA that to get all hung up on and you said, well, why would they do that? No, if they can get you to sit there and then that they're looking at you that way, like that's your dignity is gone, and that you're conceding, oh yes, under these circumstances, you guys are allowed to do this to us.
Yeah, there's
en masse. So
there's a deep Orwellian truth that if they can get you to believe absurdities, you'll go along with atrocities. And just to follow up on the gender thing, he did one other thing Trump did. From AP News, Trump also issued a warning to the International Olympic Committee ahead of the 2028 Summer Olympics in LA. I cut off the clip, but he told them that we're just not doing any gender stuff. It's just not happening. And previously, the IOC had punted the issue to each of the global federations that govern each sport. So you'll see some sports in the Olympics where men are not allowed to compete with women, and others where you can, and it's just goofy and wrong. And Trump is saying, well, at least for the 2028, if you're coming to LA, that's not flying here. And again, I'm all about it.
Of course, the joke will be on them when LA doesn't exist.
Right? What LA? It is just.
But that was another one. He turned on the water. Remember that one? Did you see that headline?
I saw it, but what could that possibly mean? Like,
I don't know, but I didn't even have time to look because I was looking at the Department of Education. It's like he restored water to California, he
flooding the zone,
I don't know what.
As if he flew there in the airplane and then just looked over and saw the spigot that everyone else had ignored and said, "Well, I just turned the spigot on."
I just realized what it is. He created them man and women, and then he said, "Let there be water."
Oh, I get it now.
I'm not trying to see
what's happening.
Sacrilegious here, but there you go.
Forgive me. I was a sinner. I did not believe.
All right. I got a clip to play. This is a short one.
Let's play it.
All right.
This is from Part of the Problem?
Yes. So if I timed this right, folks, I want to partly give Dave credit here, because it's, his show. I'm letting him set it up, and you'll just see it'll be self-explanatory. It'll be a short clip, and then we'll just respond with jocularity and mirth.
I believe this was her reacting to him passing the Senate Finance Committee. So this is Elizabeth Warren reacting to Bobby Kennedy passing the initial Senate Finance Committee vote. Here she is.
Stated, this is not only about a private company that gets sued and has to pay out. Vaccine manufacturers often operate on very slim profit margins. If they get sued repeatedly and successfully, they simply move out of the vaccine space. We've already seen this happen with vaccines in the past. 20 years ago, we watched vaccines just move away if they did not have protection from these kinds of lawsuits. The consequence of Mr. Kennedy's ability to make those lawsuits easier is also the ability to shut down access and manufacturing for vaccines for every one of us. And I think that's stated.
Okay, so how had you seen that clip, Adam?
I had not, and
how do you feel about that?
I'm just so shocked that Elizabeth Warren is such a blatant shill for Big Pharma, much like Bernie Sanders was. I think that shocked a lot of people, a lot of former Bernie bros and people that thought these are intellectual champions for, the little guy. And just as a very weird brag, my Harvard law educated wife actually took a class from Elizabeth Warren back when she was in law school, who says she's a very nice lady. But I say she's a very nice lady who's been captured by corporate interests. I mean, blatantly. That was the dumbest argument I've heard in a long time.
Well, I'm surprised that she didn't come up with something less ludicrous for her to say, right? That would be something that you'd expect, I don't know, Mitch McConnell or somebody or whatever to say about, defending big business. And well, no, we can't have. And also notice she didn't say a frivolous lawsuit. She said if they get sued and lose, then they're going to leave the space. And it was like, well, what do you want to have? They should maybe, you know what I mean? Like no, if they have to pay the damages for their product, I mean, it might not be profitable anymore. And you're like, right. And so, So again, and I mean, Dave did a good job when he was responding to it, just saying, if the argument is the awards are agreed, disproportionate, then okay, that's an argument to reform the legal system or whatever, but not just to say, well, let's just exempt these particular companies because we're realizing if they get sued from somebody who gets hurt by their product, that they might stop making the product.
Look, Bob, cars are really important to the functioning of our society. And if people are allowed to sue cars because cars, injure people such that the car manufacturers leave the industry, would have to walk. So obviously we have to make it such that you could never sue a car company again.
Right. And so, and again, you could come up with things about, because I was going through that too, just trying to trying to steel man it. And I suppose you could try to come up with, the nature of it. And because it's still, and there's so, for this stuff to work, we got to give the vaccine to so many people that statistically, but you're right. Like, well, lots of people drive. And anyway, so I was sort of surprised by just how little they care about consistency or whatever. That I could have come, I could have written her something to oppose RFK that wouldn't make it look like her big concern was, well, gee, if we make it too hard for big business to, and also like, since when is Elizabeth Warren worrying about profit margins not being big enough? And these poor companies, how can they stay? I mean, it's just astonishing. So anyway, I thought we should cover that.
I totally agree. And before we move on to the big one, I found the rest of my quote. Trump directed Marco Rubio. This is about the trans issue in his executive order. Trump directed Marco Rubio to make it clear to the IOC, the Olympics, that, quote, America categorically rejects transgender lunacy. We want them to change everything having to do with the Olympics and having to do with this absolutely ridiculous subject, end quote. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. So
Hulk smash.
Hulk smash. I've been looking forward to vacationing in the 51st state, Canada, and also the Panama Canal, which we're about to own, and then summering in Greenland, if that's a thing you do. But we can do even better than that. Apparently, we're going to own Gaza. It seems exciting, right?
You must be misunderstood. Trump didn't say that, did he?
Well, we're going to play a little clip that almost everybody has seen, at least the initial part of that. I'm going to let it play a little longer because some more interesting things get added. And for people who are watching this on video, watch Netanyahu as Trump says what he says, Because there's the first part of this, I honestly don't think he had the slightest idea this was coming. I mean, I easily could be wrong, but he just looks bewildered. So let's take a looky and have a listeny.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years. I'm hopeful that this ceasefire could be the beginning of a larger and more enduring peace that will end the bloodshed and killing once and for all. With the same goal in mind, my administration has been moving quickly to restore trust in the alliance and rebuild American strength throughout the region. And we've really done that. We're a respected nation again. A lot's happened in the last couple of weeks. We are actually a very respected nation again. I ended the last administration's de facto arms embargo on over $1 billion in military assistance for Israel. And I'm also pleased to announce that this afternoon, the United States withdrew from the anti-Semitic UN Human Rights Council and ended all of the support for the UN Relief and Works Agency, which funneled money to Hamas and which was very disloyal to humanity. Today, I also took action to restore a maximum pressure policy on the Iranian regime, and we will once again enforce the most aggressive possible sanctions, drive Iranian oil exports to zero, and diminish the regime's capacity to fund terror throughout the region and throughout the world. We had no threat when I left office. Iran was not able to sell oil. Nobody was buying oil because I said, don't buy it. If you buy it, you're not doing any business with the United States. And Hamas was not being funded. Hezbollah was not being funded. Nobody was being funded. There would never have been an October 7th. 2 weeks ago, I once again designated the Houthis as a terrorist organization. They're trying to destroy world shipping lanes, and that's not going to happen. And over the weekend, I ordered airstrikes against senior ISIS leaders hiding in Somalia.
All right. He goes on a little bit, but those are the key parts. And I don't know if you saw, Bob. What did you think? I don't think, because at the end there, Trump was saying a bunch of things that I'm sure Netanyahu did think he was going to say. You know, he's going to release the arms shipments and we're going to attack Iran, including some devastating language about driving their oil sales to zero or something. But right there at the front, when he says U.S. is going to own Gaza, that looked like a nervous man who did not know what the hell he was hearing.
Yeah, because I saw that clip from a different angle.
Yeah,
and there you can kind of see his face go back. But yeah, the angle you just played was good. That it looked like when Trump first started that the U.S. is going to, be there or something, or occupy, whatever verb he used. It looked like he had Netanyahu's attention, but then when he used the word own, it looked like he physically recoiled.
He also stopped looking at Trump and looked down into the audience, where one might imagine is one of his aides, responsible for negotiating with people below Trump.
Right.
Like, did you know anything about this?
Yeah,
that's the
other, because what I thought, my initial, not to when you just played that one, but when I first saw the clip, the first time I saw the clip at all, I thought, I actually had the opposite reaction in the sense that to me, it looked like Trump was almost a hostage reading something. You know what I mean? Like it didn't seem like his normal demeanor. It looked like, he was just reading it monotonously. So I agree with you. I don't think that Netanyahu thought he was going to say the U.S. is going to own that. And maybe that was Trump's way of, trying to salvage. I mean, he's clearly doing what the Israeli government wants in general in that region. My take when that news first broke and everyone was like, what? Is I said, hey, I've been saying this for a while. I think I said it, with you on this, these crossovers is because there's different competing things. And people on the one hand, like, wow, I can't believe they let Trump get in there. I thought they were going to kill him. And then why is he letting all these neocon people, run the Middle East? Doesn't he know? And I say, maybe those two go together. That
Right.
maybe
We made a
whether
deal.
it was explicit and in terms of literally a handshake deal, or whether it was just kind of understood and they're just like, watching each other and realizing the feints and jabs and weaves, and that maybe he said, yeah, I will give you guys the Middle East. I'm not giving you Russia. I'll give you the Middle East, and don't kill me and just let me. I'm going to just run roughshod domestically. And again, with all this stuff, I had another realization. Think of like the billionaire types who were running the Democratic Party. Another reason I could see why they thought, no, we're just going to let this go. Because we talked about last time, Adam, that how I don't think they like Kamala. I think she kind of leapfrogged and they didn't want her in there, but she made it so they had to run with her. And so I could see how they were like, no, we're not going to actually take Trump out to let her become president. But also remember that healthcare CEO getting shot and the tens of thousands of Americans openly applauding that.
Yeah, that was
so
shocking.
I could see, if you were a very wealthy Democrat who was kind of running that machine, you might think, maybe we should let Trump stay in there for a bit and kind of just, knock these people, settle them down and redirect them away. Like, so they're mad at him again and not rich people. And then, and then everyone will hate him so much. Then in 4 years, we can come in with our person that we vet this time and not Kamala Harris or, senile Joe. And then we'll just take over again. And, and so given that, suppose I'm right, that's not why the Trump team, they know that too. And so they're saying we have to just dynamite everything. Like there can't be a mechanism left standing when they take over after us to then hunt us down and punish us for what we just did. So that I can kind of see. Anyway, I realize I'm ex post explaining everything once I already know what the answer is, but that's how I'm trying to make sense of what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I have a few. I guess I'm going to try and steel man maybe what Trump is doing, or maybe talk about the possible good. But I want to establish my libertarian bona fides. I hate this. I hate everything about this. I want the United
Except all the
States.
good things you're going to say about it.
Yes, or possibilities. I mean, but I want the
It's
United
a
States.
hate-love relationship.
Yeah, God.
Okay, I'll let you talk. How's that?
Is that going to be the way this thing goes with Trump? We love him, we hate him. I want the U.S. government out of the Middle East. Disentangle, not further dive in. So I do not like this in the slightest. But it does sort of occur to me, and this is back to the shaking the box sort of theme. For decades now, since 1967 and probably earlier on, this thing has been in this weird stalemate where no solution seems possibly, like a single state solution does not work because Israel wants to claim to be democratic, and that just doesn't work math-wise with all these Arabs, Palestinians. And a two-state solution doesn't work because Israel does not want that. They want all of quote-unquote greater Israel. So this thing has been locked in this, stalemate for a long time. And Trump coming in and saying, well, I know the United States will own Gaza. That's a shaking the box move.
Yeah,
and maybe adding, like there's a thing in the art of negotiation that if you've got something that's deadlocked, a way to break that loose is to add more items to the deal, add more variables, add more things that you can discuss and play with, make the deal bigger such that somebody will want something more than another person wants to not let him have it. And then you'll get the big deal that you wanted. And this could be like that. I can't imagine the Palestinians aren't going to like America being there. And neither does Israel, really. I mean, they want to be able to control their own destiny here and do all the horrible things they want to do without anybody, getting, stepping in between and mandating the rules of the game. I mean, that's why both sides hated it when England was, controlling that region after World War I. So I don't know. Maybe something good could come out of this just by changing the dynamic. And then I used to argue a little bit with my wife, who is Jewish. After October 7th, we're learning more about the history of the conflict, and listening to Daryl Cooper and Martyr Made. And she comes down more on one side, I come down more on the other. one day after we were discussing this for hours, she just throws her hands up and says, "I know. I have the solution. Nobody gets to live there. We'll kick the Palestinians out and the Jews." Which made me laugh because Trump says, "Well, America owns Gaza now." And I could imagine that quickly turning into, "Well, we could take care of this West Bank situation too. Tell you what, we own that also." Gosh darn it, these neighbors sure do seem to be violent. I guess maybe we need to kick them out too. And so everybody leaves and it becomes, I don't know, Middle Eastern Disneyland or something, the whole place.
Or maybe instead of sending our convicts to El Salvador, we send them over there.
Did somebody offer you a position in the Trump cabinet?
Not officially, but yeah, I think you might be entirely right. And I think for sure Israel's plan was, we are just going to make this untenable until they all just leave, and then that's our land.
Right.
Because if you've seen,
right,
like Candace Owens tweeting out pictures of what Gaza looks like, it's just leveled. It is, and it's not just like, oh yeah, you can kind of see these buildings over here took some shrapnel or what. No, it is just like, how could anyone live there? And so that's when I really I had seen people alleging, oh, this is the plan all along. And I was like, okay, maybe whatever. But when I saw those photos, I was like, oh yeah, that's the plan, that they just want to make this uninhabitable. And, that's why the people keep saying, well, how come Egypt doesn't take them? How come these neighbors that claim to care so much about the Palestinians, why don't they take them all in? And so I don't think the Palestinians are staying there, if I had to guess right now, because the Trump administration, my understanding, is asking the neighboring countries, like, hey, can you take these people in?
Ending, or bribing.
Yeah. And so to me, I think that's what they're, I could even go so far, like, to reconcile with what you're saying. I know some people are going to think I'm a nut job and like ludicrously naive. I could see Trump thinking, seeing, yeah, that's what the situation is. Israel is not letting them have this ever again. Because if the plan didn't work, then that means they did all that horrible stuff for no reason.
Right.
I mean, so it's almost like, from Netanyahu's position, given that he's where he is right now, he couldn't possibly capitulate on it, because then, it'd be like if Winston Churchill lost the war. It's not just like, hey, well, you tried. It's like, no, you're a war criminal and, you're getting tried. So given that, I could see Trump thinking, I can come in and at least end the bloodshed and make this orderly. Like, these people, you get what I'm saying?
No, totally. I could see maybe Trump thinking of it along these lines, like he's traveled back in time and witnessed America in the middle of the Trail of Tears sort of episode with, how we treated the Indians here, Native Americans. And maybe he's just thinking, okay, well, you got to go ahead and hurry up with this so that it all becomes okay, just like it is here in America. And I don't think that works because A, the numbers involved are so much different. And B, it's 2025, not 18. I don't know what I'm referencing year-wise. And also, these people have a good reason to be pissed. And even if Egypt and Jordan, et cetera, accept them, I don't think that ends your terrorism problem.
No.
I don't think they're just going to get over it. And it's not a thing that you can kill your way into peace. And I don't think you can ethnically cleanse your way into peace. And despite all the hopeful things I said about maybe the shaking the box thing, I don't want U.S. boots on the ground. I think that's a disaster. I don't want us to be involved in this. The whole thing just makes me disgusted and sick to my stomach, and it breaks my heart and our pocketbook, in case you care about things like that.
Well, just going along with what you're saying about making it quick. I mean, that Trump said that a while ago. I don't remember exactly when. Said to Netanyahu before the election. Said,
finish this.
Yeah, he said, you have weeks, not months, something like that. And so I think he saw they're not wrapping this up, and so that this may have been in Trump's mind. He might think, I clearly don't have the power to just tell Israel no, but we can kind of come in and say, all right, well, what you're doing right now, we just can't allow this to continue. Let's do it this way. And here, you guys get your land. And then, here, all you babies and toddlers, at least you're going to be alive now. And you're going to have to move, but at least you're not going to slowly starve to death. So.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I never thought he would ever say that in a million years. And I don't know what he's thinking.
Yeah. I'm wondering what he's going to do next week.
I mean, Can we possibly keep he's flooding the zone even here on?
We didn't even talk about it. He's going to declassify all the JFK stuff. I mean,
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we haven't even talked about that. My short version is I just don't believe that. I believe the CIA and the Pentagon had something to do with killing JFK, but I don't believe they kept the records and are going to. I mean, if a bookie can keep 2 sets of books or a mobster or whatever, you don't think the CIA can keep two sets of records? So yeah, I don't think.
Right. I don't think that they're going to declassify it and it's going to say, "Yep, we did it."
No,
It got us. But
no.
on the other hand, there are things that have been kept secret this long. So what is it? You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, we might have said it in another episode, but what I'm hoping for is that in the bunch of bull pucky that they do release, you'll see some inconsistencies that show they must be lying.
Right.
Because it's very hard to cover things up in a clean way.
Yeah. I still think it's going to be that they were mad that Kennedy forced their hand and they had to fake the moon landing because he just shut his mouth off. Like, why didn't you say within 2 decades? Why did you have to say that?
And that's not how you pronounce decade, you Boston jerk. Is he from Boston? Well, whatever. Northeastern.
Massachusetts, something. Yeah.
Massachusetts, something. All right. So have we covered all as much of the Trump
think
stuff
so.
as we can cover? And
I think we got to give the people a break. They got to catch their breath.
All right. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Bob. If you're watching this on the Bob Murphy Show, please check out Heyman Nature on YouTube and also heymannature.substack.com for my writings. And if it's the other way around, check out Bob at bobmurphyshow.com. And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, everybody.